Hey guys, welcome to Madhouse. Marcus Davis here. Thank you for coming by again. We're almost through this coronavirus thing. Just a couple more days and we should be getting off of lockdown. But until that time, I'm still using the time wisely. I hope you are too. Always trying to work on my craft. Today, I'm working on a Afrobeat track. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marcus Davis. We're here in Madhouse Studios. And I've been taking the last few weeks to walk people through some of my favorite tips and tricks for mixing, for production, for all the above. So welcome. I'll be sharing with you what I know and how I use what I know, and hopefully it's useful to you. And if it is, feel free to subscribe and like so you can be notified when we do further videos. So today we're going to be diving into an Afrobeat track. To be fair, this is something I have never done before. This will be my first time really trying to do an Afrobeat track. And I'll be kind of walking you through my approach, especially when I'm learning a new genre of music. And we'll be focusing on the drums. And then at a later tutorial, we'll be focusing on some of the other melodic instruments and things like that. And we'll also take a look at vocals as well. But for today, we're going to really hone in on the drum programming, which with this particular genre can be very challenging. There's a lot of rhythms, a lot of sub-rhythms going on. And so I'll kind of walk you through how I got there and yeah, you can decide for yourself whether or not I got there. All right, so stay tuned, check it out. We're just going to dive in right now. All right, let's jump in. Before we go through this beat, I want to hip you guys to a really cool tool that I use. It's called Splice. Some of you may know about it, some of you may not, but it's a really cool tool. I'll put the link to the site in the description below, and it's something you guys should really check out. So what Splice does is it's basically a producer resource that has all of these samples divided up, already organized from genre, BPM, different type, kicks, snares, hi-hats, loops, synths, Rhodes, anything you can imagine. And you pay a monthly fee of like $10 a month or something like that. And this is not a sponsorship or an endorsement for them. This is just truly something that I use that has just changed the game for me. So it's really cool. I'll show you what it looks like here. This is actually the app that you download onto your desktop once you've registered on the site. And basically it keeps track of all of your downloads and everything that you're basically getting, and you get credits every month. And so every month every month that you pay, your credits refill. So pretty much once you download something on here, it goes from saying 1 credit to, for instance, I'll do it. I'll grab this snare right here. So I want to get that. Now it turns into a little square, and I could take this square and literally drag it right into my DAW, right? So if I'm looking for kicks, or snares, or even percussion, I can use this little search engine up here to find what I need. Right now I'm in reggaeton. Let's say I go back. It's even divided it by genres, different producer packs. It's really cool. So I can go, genre. Let's say I want something trap. Let's say I want, kicks. I can go to drums. I can type in kicks. When I find something that I like, I can seriously just click on it, download it, and drag it in. So it's really cool, really useful tool for keeping up with production and the sounds that are used in production. Just wanted to share that with you because I will be mentioning in throughout this beat breakdown, that I'm using Splice for these samples. So now you know what Splice is. Really cool. There'll be a link to it in the description below. All right. So the first thing that I focus on usually is just coming up with a cool melodic pattern. Nothing that I'm overly committed to, but something that, is definitely giving me a vibe that I can start building some drums around. So first, I'll just play you the synth pattern that I kind of came with and the guitar pattern that I came with that kind of pushed me in the direction of kind of making an Afrobeat type track. So this is the pattern. So pretty straightforward. I'm using a muted guitar sample. I'm layering it with a synth pattern. I'm doing an octave below with the bass and some cool little marimba type keys on top. So we'll dive more into that, but today we're going to focus on the drums. Once I get this far, what I do is I start identifying what direction I want to go in. Do I want this to be a club like house four on the floor? Or am I looking for something more of like an Afrobeat? In this case, I was looking for something that more had that Afrobeat feel. I'm really digging that sound right now. So the first thing I did is I went online and looked at a few different Afrobeat songs. One of my favorite artists right now that's doing that genre is a girl named Coffee, spelled with a K. Check her out. I think it's very important to use pegs so you kind of stay on track and you know that you're kind of hitting that genre and you're meeting that genre right where it is at. And you know that if people are into this, they'll probably be into what you're doing. So it also helps me pick the drum sounds that I'm using, everything. So it's not just about the patterns, it's about what type of kicks am I using? What type of snares am I using? Am I using hi-hats? What type of percussion am I using? Those different types of things. And I'm able to kind of draw from the peg or a few different pegs kind of what the sensibilities are for that genre. So that's kind of where I started. I had this. And I like to start usually with kicks. That usually gives me that foundation, that bottom end foundation I'm looking for. If you look at my session here, I have a high kick and a low kick. I'll just play you the high kick first. Simple pattern. Nothing crazy. Definitely pulled this from listening to Coffee and artists like Coffee in that genre, and that kind of dictated the pattern. And it's my high kick, which is actually all I'm using in the verses, which I'll talk about later. And then when the chorus drops, I have a high and low kick. Here's my low kick real quick. This is with them together. Just a low kick. All right. So with them together, you get a little bit more meat and a little bit more, girth to the sound. So let me just show you what's on the channel here. So for the high kick, I love this EQ. This is a Waves EQ. And one of the reasons why I love this EQ is because it has solo buttons right on it that just make it really easy for me to kind of dial in the frequency I want to eliminate. I do a lot of subtractive EQ, which means I'm taking frequencies out that I don't like a lot more than I'm adding frequencies most of the time. So with this kick, I'm pulling out this frequency. Let's just solo it for a minute. All right, so I'm able to solo that and find the frequency I want to eliminate. This is what it sounds like with that frequency in. Got a little bit more weight to it, but I'm pulling it out because I plan to double up the kick. And so because I plan to double up the kick, I don't want too much weight down there. Otherwise, it'll just start to sound blurry and muffled and unfocused, right? So I'm pulling out a little bit of that weight. What I really want is I want that top end clickiness feel. So that's what I'm getting right now. Most top end, still a little bottom round, but mostly top. A lot of the low mid is pulled out. So that's all I've done there. And then I layered it with a low kick. Let's take a look at the low kick. What I'm going for with this kick is I wanted grit. I wanted the grit. I didn't want a whole lot of low end too because I'm going to use a sub bass for the song. And so I don't want too much going on, but I did want it a little weightier, a little bit more grit. So what I've done is I use a kick with a little bit more grit. And I've also just turned up that grit and filtered out some of the high end so it doesn't clash with the high end of my first kick. So this is what that kick sounds like by itself. This is if I turn off the EQ. Not much difference, right? But I am boosting the grit of the kick a little bit, making sure that there's nothing in the top end that could be clashing with my other kick. And that's pretty much it. Let it go. So with them together, nice full round sound, right? Now, so yeah, I usually start with the kick. I program, I keep it simple with the programming, especially in the beginning. If I feel like I need to add more, I do, but I do that at a later time. The way I program this actually is I didn't use a drum machine, I didn't use the MPC or anything like that. I simply found kicks on Splice that I liked, and I dragged them onto the grid, and I lined them up the way that I wanted them to be. And again, sometimes I work like that. Sometimes I play the groove. But a lot of times when I'm exploring new genres, I try to steer away from like trying to play it because I resort back to something that's familiar to me. So instead of trying to play it, I just literally listen to a peg and I follow the peg as my foundation and I just line things up to the grid. So I'm getting that sound that's not influenced by me trying to sit there and play stuff, right? So that's kind of where I start. And then later I'll start playing stuff in and we'll talk more about that in a bit. So then I did the same thing with the clap, found a cool clap on that I liked on Splice, dragged it right into the session, brought it into the session, lined it up where I needed to line it up. Let's check it out. You'll notice that there's just at this beat here, there's two claps. And all I did is copy the clap right next to it and lower that one. So I literally highlighted the second clap, went over to my transpose and just took it down 4 semitones. And what that gives me is a nice little accent that's at a different pitch. And that's also another technique that I think is worth mentioning when you're doing drum programming is sometimes to add interest, just changing the pitch of the same instrument just on certain hits just takes it to another place. Also, what I did is I turned it down. So I copied it, pitched it down, and then I took the gain over here and brought it down 5.4 just until it felt good to me. I just took it down in volume. And this is what I would call a ghost note. And so basically when a drummer plays a lot of times, he's hitting on the downbeats and stuff like that with the drum, but every once in a while he'll add that little quick little snare roll in or that quick little extra hit, or sometimes he'll just hit the stick on the rim a little differently, and it just creates a little pop, a little ear candy. And so I'm kind of recreating that by just copying one of those claps, putting it on a little bit of an offbeat rhythm, and then turning it down, tuning it down so that it just feels a little different, but it's really the same snare, just pitch down and lower volume. All right, so that's it. Really, that's the foundation of the beat. And now from there, I start, adding little extras. So I have a snap down here. Let's see what my snap is doing. Splice sampled, looked up snap, brought it in, and I pretty much just used the snap because I was hearing it in the peg that I was listening to, and I just followed that groove. And I do that a lot, like I said, especially when I'm working with a new genre. I try to get as close to the foundation of whatever peg I'm using as possible. Because I know throughout this process, I'm going to veer away from it gradually. I'm going to start adding my own touches as the production evolves. But for me, it's crucial at the beginning stage to really lock in to the peg and lock in to what I'm trying to go for out of that sound. So if I'm going for an Afrobeat, I pick an Afrobeat peg and I really try to get it as close as I can as far as the drums are concerned in the beginning. So here we have. That's my snaps. Now, this is where I start to kind of have fun. When I feel like I've got a grip on the genre, then I kind of listen more loosely and just start picking out little things that I like. Like for instance, I'll hear like, oh, okay, they've got a cool little percussion loop happening in the background. So I'll go on Splice or I'll go on the MPC or I'll go wherever, and I'll just try to create my own little percussion loop. And it doesn't have to be anything like theirs, but I just try to create one that gives you the same feeling. So if we jump over here as the beat evolves, you'll hear I'm starting to add in hats, different claps, sticks, and we'll go down and I'll show you. So here's my hat pattern. For this, I just pulled out the MPC, had my groove going, and just started tapping. Found me a cool little hi-hat, started tapping a groove that worked well with the kick and snare arrangement that I've already got in place. So that was really all I did there, and nothing fancy, just something that's creating a pace. And I use hi-hats to create a pace. If I want it to be, if I want to drive the tempo of this production, I use faster hi-hat pattern. If I want to slow it down and make it kind of lazy and sit back, I use a slower hi-hat pattern. For this, by the time this portion of the track comes in, I want you like ride into it. So that's why I got little 16th note pattern going, right? After that, I start adding a little bit of complexity to the track. So I'll go and I've got another clap, which I'm calling ghost claps, and these ghost claps are just me. I took that original clap, I sampled it into my MPC, and I started creating a little sub pattern with that same clap at a lower volume, and just seeing if I could create a little texture, a little bit of complexity around my groove. Here's what that sounds like. Here's it by itself. Not very cool, right? But when you put it in context with everything else, you start to get a bigger picture, and that picture looks like this. And really, that's just me exploring, trying different swing grooves with the clap, and just kind of moving stuff around until I got something that's giving me the vibe that I'm going for, which is that Afrobeat vibe. And that's another thing I do when I'm drum programming. I just start throwing a lot of stuff in there once I've kind of got the foundation, and then I just delete the stuff that doesn't work later. All right, so let's move on real quick. We got sticks. This, which is something I always do with probably 80% of the tracks that I do, especially if they're groove driven, is I always add a live element. And I can't stress the value of this enough. Adding a live element takes your production from a computer generated sounding production to something that has a little bit more organic feel, but still the bones and the foundation of a solid computer generated production, right? So you get the best of both worlds a little bit. And so what I did is I got one of my little percussion instruments in here, and I started playing out a pattern. Compressing it, cutting it up, picking the best pieces, and then adding a little reverb, and that's what we have. So now, one of the things that I do, a little secret of mine, to kind of tie all of that in together, is I introduce a little noise. Now, what I mean is sometimes I'll just pick a loop. It could be a percussion loop, it could be just a loop with noise in it, it could be voices, it doesn't really matter. And what I'm really trying to do with it is I'm trying to blur the lines a bit. And so what I do is I find a loop. In this case, I found a percussion loop. I've added a little bit of distortion and things like that. And then I turn it way down so that it almost feels more like a reverb and less like an actual percussion loop. Let me play the percussion loop real quick. And I've just loaded up Native Instruments Supercharged GT on it, and I'll play it with and without this. This is without it. What it does when you turn it on, listen closely, it brings up a lot of the noise in the background. Take a listen. Hear all that white noise in the background? That's what I want. I want a little fuzz. I want a little blurriness. Noise is a really good tool to kind of, it almost glues your track together and makes it feel cohesive because it blurs a lot of the lines. When everything is really crisp and really tight and you want something to just have a little bit more dirt to it and a little bit more texture to it, just find a loop, add a little distortion, add a little noise, and put it in the background. Watch what happens. Now watch what happens when I turn it off. That's cool, but when you add a little bit of dirt to it, notice how it makes everything feel like it's working together now. Before, everything was separate, and then you bring a little dirty loop in there and everything seems to just kind of fit into a nice little box. Because you can't tell where one thing ends and one thing begins, and it just kind of blurs together. Now, if you have that too loud, it just becomes distracting and unfocused. But if you have it low enough, it just kind of blurs the lines. So with all that, this is what my drums sound like on top of my groove. First half of my chorus starts like this. Okay, so you might notice that there's a little extra in there. If you look at these tracks here where I have them named Trans 1 and Trans 2, what those actually are transitions. And they're very important for modern drum production because we're using a lot of loops. And so one trick to make it feel like there's less loops is to create cool little transition moments or create moments of silence. So that's another technique. My music teacher used to always tell me, play the silence or play the rest. And what he meant was the rests, the quiet parts, are just as important as the busy parts because they create contrast. And so you can sometimes just mute things, which you'll notice I do in certain sections. And then you can also create cool little transition moments that make the loop feel less like a bunch of loops and more like an organic thing taking you on a journey. So what I have is I have one of these transitions that happens coming out of the verse into the chorus here. Play it for you from here. And then it's right here. And then I have another transition happening at bar 18 that's taking you from the beginning of that chorus into the part where I really want you to dance. So instead of just going from one section to another, I create a nice little transition point that makes it feel more alive. So I'll play that for you and then I'll tell you how I did it. Transition 1. See how it creates movement and it tells the listener, oh, get ready, something's coming, right? And that's really what programming is all about. It's leading your listener on a journey from one stage to another. And the most important part of leading that listener on that journey is good transitions. So how did I do it? Well, I cheated. I used Splice. Just kidding. There's no such thing as cheating. Really, at the end of the day, you use what you can. You use the tools available to you. In this case, I used Splice. I literally typed in Splice. I went to, I think, a Cuban one or maybe an Afrobeat, whatever was available. It could have even been reggaeton. And I literally typed in transitions. And I found all kinds of loops. In this case, I found this loop here. Now, that loop was already at 100 BPM, so I got lucky. I was able to just take it, drag it right into my session, and it worked. And I just kept it moving. And then the next loop, let's see what that loop was at. This loop may not have been, oh, it was. It was at 100 BPM as well. So it was ready to go already. Let's take a listen from the top. Snaps. Nice little light kick. Transition, bigger kick. Transition, silence. Hopefully that's been helpful to you. At a later tutorial, we'll move down this session. We'll get into the synths that I'm using, the basses that I'm using, and we're going to get into the vocals that I've written and produced for this song, how I'm using them, how I'm mixing them, how I wrote them. So there's a lot more to come. Hopefully this was helpful to you. This is the first of a series on this particular project. Stay tuned. See you guys next time. Thank you guys for staying to the end of the video. I hope this information was valuable to you. If so, feel free to subscribe and like, and stay tuned for our up and coming episodes as we dive further into this production. Be safe out there. We'll see you soon.